The whispers of Wind Creek. Dusty Rivers squinted against the sun, its glare reflecting off the parched earth as he patrolled the western perimeter of his land, checking the fence. Wind Creek, usually a mere thread of water, raged, swollen and turbulent from recent downpours, its banks a quagmire. The air, thick and humid, reeked of wet soil and resinous pines. Pushing his herd farther out this season, he'd found Richer grazing closer to the creek. A wordless tune, born of solitude and saddle sores, had been his companion when he spotted it. Or rather, what remained. A mangled wagon, reduced to kindling and shredded canvas, lay scattered among the cottonwoods lining the creek. Wheels splayed at grotesque angles suggested a cataclysmic impact. Blue, his chestnut mare, shuddered, her ears flicking back and forth. Unease prickled at Dusty's senses. Dismounting, the silence only amplified the frantic drumming of his pulse. The air, once promising rain, now carried a sharp, metallic scent that turned his stomach. He tethered Blue to a gnarled juniper and unsheathed his rifle. Moving with deliberate caution, his boots sank into the softened ground. Up close, the scene was a tableau of ruin. Scattered amidst the wreckage were poignant fragments of a life violently interrupted. A doll with a missing limb, a battered tin cup, a forlorn scattering of cards. Near one of the shattered wheels, a dark stain seeped into the soil. A chill snaked down his spine. He followed the trail of devastation, eyes darting through the surrounding trees, straining for a sound beyond the constant, mournful susurrus of Wind Creek. He found the first body just beyond, partially concealed by a tattered canvas flap. A man, middle-aged, judging by the silver threading through his beard, stared sightlessly at the sky. A stranger. He'd never seen the man in these parts. Further down the muddy bank, he discovered two more corpses. A woman and another man, their clothing suggesting travelers, not ranchers. They lay inert, devoid of life. The scene whispered a tale of brutal conflict, a desperate, losing battle. Arrows, judging by the feathered fletching protruding from tree trunks and the bodies themselves. But this wasn't tribal land. A faint whimper, barely audible above the creek's roar, stopped him cold. He lowered his rifle a fraction, every nerve on high alert. Guided by the sound, he pushed through a dense thicket of willows and found her. A young woman sprawled near the water's edge, her garments ripped and stained crimson. Frail, almost bird-like, her face was ashen, etched with pain. He saw no immediate wounds, but her breathing was shallow, a delicate flutter in her chest. Tightly clutched in her hand was a small, ornate music box, its silver casing dulled with grime and gore. Dusty knelt beside her, his rifle grounded. He extended a calloused hand, hesitated, then gently brushed her cheek. Her skin felt icy, slick with sweat. "Hey there," he murmured, his voice raspy with disuse. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of a turbulent ocean. Unfocused, clouded with suffering and confusion. She tried to speak, but only a feeble cough escaped her parched throat. He carefully lifted her into his arms, surprised by her weightlessness. The music box remained locked in her grip. He could feel the fragility of her bones beneath the torn fabric of her dress. He didn't know her, didn't know the story behind this massacre, but one thing was certain. He couldn't abandon her to her fate. He carried her back to Blue, his heart burdened by a heavy premonition. He laid her gently across the saddle, her head nestled against Blue's warm flank. Mounting behind her, he carefully supported her weight. As they rode toward the distant ranch house, the whispers of Wind Creek seemed to pursue them, carrying a somber ballad of loss and unsolved riddles. He glanced down at the woman cradled in his arms, her fingers still vice-like around the music box. What secrets did it safeguard? What role had she played in the carnage he'd stumbled upon? And did he possess the strength to shield her from the forces that had brought her to this desolate corner of the world? A glimmer of life. Dusty bore her weight like precious cargo, his muscles screaming in protest. Blue's steady amble provided a somber rhythm to their journey. The ranch drew nearer, its familiar aroma, sun-scorched earth and the sharp tang of sage, offered a small measure of solace against the coppery stench of blood that permeated the air. He gently coaxed Blue into a faster clip, his eyes trained on the distant barn's silhouette stark against the bruised dusk sky. Alara remained lost in the silent depths of unconsciousness, her breathing shallow and ragged. Each subtle sway elicited a faint whimper, a sound that chipped away at Dusty's composure. He told himself it was merely pain, the body's outcry against trauma. Yet, a disquieting premonition coiled in his gut. He was no physician. The ranch house, a humble sanctuary fashioned from sturdy logs, greeted him with the subtle perfume of wood smoke and aged leather. With a nudge of his shoulder, he pushed the door inward, carefully stepping into the single room. The interior was sparsely appointed. A roughly hewn table, a pair of chairs, a cot nestled in the corner. He lowered Alara onto the cot, the coarse wool blanket providing an unexpected contrast to the delicate linen of her tattered gown. Kneeling beside her, his weathered fingers delicately assessed her forehead. Burning hot, he needed to cleanse her wounds. Feeding the hearth's embers, he coaxed the flames into a lively dance, their shadows flickering across the log walls. Water simmered in a dented tin pot, the surrounding quiet amplified by the minuscule sounds, the fire's gentle crackle, Blue's muffled breaths from the corral outside. He dampened a clean cloth in the warmed water and began to meticulously wipe away the grime and blood that marred her complexion. Beneath the dirt, her skin possessed a porcelain-like fragility. Long, sable lashes framed eyes that stubbornly remained shut. He discovered a vicious laceration on her shoulder, angry and inflamed, along with a shallower wound gracing her arm. Slowly, methodically, he worked, rinsing and cleaning, his brow furrowed in concentration. Just outside the doorway, Blue stood sentinel, head erect, ears twitching. Her usual placidity had given way to a tense vigilance. Dusty understood. She sensed the day's wrongness, the lingering aura of death that clung to him and now haunted the small space. He trusted her instincts implicitly. As he bound Alara's arm with strips of clean cloth, his attention snagged on the undeniable quality of her attire. The shredded remnants of her dress whispered of luxurious fabric, elaborate embroidery. Even now stained and soiled, it hinted at a life worlds away from the harsh Montana plains. He noted the delicate lace at her cuffs, the meticulous stitching of her underthings. Who was she? And what series of unfortunate events had led her to this desolate place, into the path of such savage brutality? He completed the bandaging, his hand pausing momentarily at her wrist. Her skin felt incredibly smooth, almost ethereal. He wondered about her hands, the tasks they were accustomed to performing. Certainly not the grueling work of ranch life. These were hands designed to cradle fine china, not wield a shovel. He stoked the fire, bathing the room in a warm, amber glow. Drawing a chair close to the cot, his gaze remained fixed on her still features. Common sense urged him to ride for help, for a physician. But he couldn't abandon her. Not yet. He reached out, gently pushing a stray tendril of hair from her forehead. He felt the faintest whisper of breath against his fingertips, a fragile ember of life flickering in the face of so much devastation. He would stay. He would keep watch. He would bide his time. And he would strive to shield her from whatever malevolence had ensnared her on the open plains. The mysteries veiled in her silence would have to wait. For this moment, only that glimmer of vitality mattered. Awakening. A low moan, like wind whispering through brittle branches, drifted through the room. Dusty, who'd been dozing in the worn armchair pulled close to the bed, snapped awake. He held his breath, listening. The moan came again, stronger this time, followed by a soft rustling of the bedsheets. He leaned forward, his heart thudding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. Alara, or rather, the woman he'd decided to call Ellie for now, was stirring. Her eyelids fluttered, pale and delicate against the shadows of her face. She blinked, a slow, bewildered blink, and her eyes, the color of storm clouds gathering over the prairie, opened. They were unfocused, glazed with confusion and pain. Where? Her voice was a dry rasp, barely audible. She licked her lips, a small, vulnerable gesture. Dusty reached for the water glass on the bedside table, carefully lifting her head and holding it to her lips. She drank greedily, her throat working. When she'd had her fill, she pushed him away weakly. Easy now, he murmured, setting the glass back down. You've been out for a while. Her brow furrowed, a painful crease etched between her eyes. She reached up, her fingers tracing the bandage that wrapped around her head. What happened? He hesitated. He didn't want to frighten her more than she already was. You were hurt. I found you out on the trail. He kept the details vague, the image of the carnage still fresh in his mind. Her eyes widened, a flicker of terror sparking within them. The trail? I don't understand. She tried to sit up, but a sharp intake of breath betrayed her pain. Lie still, Dusty urged, gently pressing her back against the pillows. You need to rest. She ignored him, her gaze darting around the small room, taking in the rough-hewn logs, the simple furniture, the faded floral wallpaper. "Who are you? Where am I?" Dusty sighed. He'd expected this in a way. The blow to her head must have scrambled things. "My name is Dusty Rivers. You're at my ranch about 20 miles north of Redemption." Redemption. She repeated the name, testing it on her tongue. Her expression remained blank. I don't know any of that." Panic began to rise in her voice. "I don't remember anything. Who am I?" Her hands trembled as she reached up to clutch her head, as if trying to physically grasp the lost memories. Dusty knelt beside the bed, his calloused hand covering hers. "Hey, it's okay. Take it easy. It'll come back to you." He wasn't sure if he believed that, but he needed to reassure her. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. "No, it won't. I can feel it. It's gone." She squeezed his hand tightly. "Please, tell me. Do you know who I am?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't. I found you unconscious. You didn't have any identification on you." He paused, considering. "For now, how about I call you Ellie? Until you remember your real name." The suggestion seemed to calm her slightly. "Ellie," she whispered, a faint smile touching her lips. "Yes, Ellie. I like that." He stood up, offering her another glass of water. "Are you hungry? I can make you something." She nodded, her eyes still searching his face, seeking some clue, some recognition that wasn't there. "Anything. Thank you." As Dusty turned to leave the room, to the comforting clatter of pans and the simple act of preparing food, he knew that this was just the beginning. Taking care of her wounds was one thing, but piecing together her shattered memory, that was a whole different kind of challenge. And he had a feeling, a gnawing unease in his gut, that the truth about Ellie's past was far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. Life on the ranch. The sun, a molten coin in the vast Wyoming sky, beat down on Alara's back as she scattered feed for the chickens. Dusty watched her from the porch, leaning against a weathered post, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. He'd shown her once, the previous morning, how to toss the grain in wide arcs to avoid a feathered stampede. Now she mimicked him perfectly, her movements surprisingly graceful for someone who looked like she'd never dirted her hands. "Not bad, Ellie," he called out, using the name he'd given her, the only one she seemed to respond to. "They'll be laying golden eggs for you." She straightened, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek, leaving a faint brown streak. "Golden eggs?" she asked, her voice still a little raspy from disuse and trauma. Dusty chuckled. "Metaphorical golden eggs. Just means they'll be happy and healthy." Alara tilted her head, considering this. "I see. So, happy chickens produce more happiness." He pushed himself off the post. "Something like that. Come on. Fence needs mending before the cattle decide to explore the neighbor's land." The fence was a sorry sight, a section of posts splintered and leaning precariously, the wire sagging like a tired grin. Dusty showed Alara how to use the post-hole digger, the heavy tool proving surprisingly challenging for her. Her initial attempts were clumsy, the digger sinking crookedly into the hard-packed earth. But she persevered, her brow furrowed in concentration, her movements becoming more fluid with each attempt. Dusty watched, impressed. He'd expected her to give up, to complain about the heat or the dirt. Instead, she met the challenge with a quiet determination he found intriguing. By late afternoon, the fence stood repaired, a testament to their combined efforts. Alara's hands were blistered and raw, her face flushed with exertion. They sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, sharing a canteen of water. "Thank you, Dusty," she said, her voice softer now, the rasp almost gone. "For all of this." He shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "It's nothing. Just doing what anyone would do." "I doubt that," she murmured, looking out at the rolling hills, the endless expanse of blue sky. "I don't think many people would have done what you did." That night, after a simple meal of beans and biscuits, they sat by the campfire, the flames casting dancing shadows on their faces. Dusty told stories of his life on the ranch, of cattle drives and storms, and the quiet satisfaction of working the land. Alara listened intently, her eyes wide with fascination. She, in turn, told him snippets of something. Vague images, fleeting sensations. A grand house filled with echoing voices. Elaborate gowns and glittering jewels. Formal dinners and stifled laughter. But the memories were fractured like shards of glass, offering no clear picture. "It's like I'm looking through a fog," she said, frustration lacing her voice. "I know these things are part of me, but I can't grasp them." Dusty reached out, his hand hovering over hers before pulling back. Don't push it, Ellie. They'll come back when they're ready. In the meantime, just be here. Be present. She looked at him, her eyes searching his. And what is here? Here, he said, gesturing to the fire, the stars, the endless horizon, is a place to heal. A place to be safe. He saw a flicker of something in her eyes, hope, perhaps, or maybe just gratitude. Whatever it was, it made his heart ache in a way he hadn't felt in years. As the fire dwindled, casting long, skeletal shadows, a coyote howled in the distance. Elara shivered, pulling her thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. Dusty stood and added another log to the fire, watching as the flames flared, pushing back the darkness. He wasn't sure who Elara was or what secrets she carried. But he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that he would protect her, no matter the cost. The quiet rancher had a purpose now, and his purpose had a name, Ellie. Shadows on the horizon. Heat devils spun dizzying waltzes across the baked earth, their taunts a stark contrast to the stillness suffocating the late afternoon. Dusty, shielding his eyes against the sun's brutal glare, made them out first, 3 riders, obsidian shapes blurring in the shimmering heat. Southbound, they drove their mounts relentlessly, a sight that cinched his gut with foreboding. Visitors were scarce enough, riders fleeing a phantom heralded trouble. He tracked their approach, fingers twitching towards the Winchester snug in its saddle sheath. Ellie was inside, tending the small garden he'd helped her coax from the unforgiving soil. The thought of those hard-faced men anywhere near her ignited a surge of primal protectiveness. As they closed the distance, the leader edged forward. He was a man carved from granite, his face a roadmap of sun and wind, his eyes wells that seemed to swallow light. A thick, iron-gray mustache hung heavy over a mouth set in a permanent scowl. His companions remained a few lengths behind, their features lost in the deep shade of their hats, exuding a palpable, unsettling quiet. Afternoon, the lead rider rasped, hauling his horse to a stop a few yards from Dusty. His voice grated like rusted hinges. We're looking for someone. Dusty remained unmoved, his gaze unwavering. Folks tend to wander off in country like this. Who's your someone? A wagon, the man stated, his eyes tightening. Fancy wagon. And a woman. Highborn, some say. He punctuated the statement with a brown jet of tobacco juice against the arid ground. Heard tell it was headed this way. Dusty's pulse jumped, but he masked it well. Haven't seen any wagons? Or blue bloods? He kept his tone level, almost conversational. Just me and my crew. The man's gaze raked over the sparse ranch buildings, lingering on the small, flourishing patch where Ellie had been working moments before. You alone out here, rancher? Like I said, me and the boys, Dusty reiterated, a hard edge entering his voice. They're out riding fence. A bald-faced lie, but he wasn't about to offer Ellie to these carrion birds. The lead rider dismounted, his movements slow and deliberate. The other 2 remained mounted, silent sentinels. He closed the distance to Dusty, his eyes drilling into him. This woman, she's of consequence. Certain people are anxious for her whereabouts. If you're concealing something, best unburden yourself now. Dusty stood his ground, the implicit threat vibrating in the air. I told you I haven't seen anyone. You're welcome to search, but you'll be wasting your time. He swept his hand towards the immensity of the surrounding landscape. This is a vast territory. If they came this way, they could be leagues away by now. The man scrutinized him for a long, silent moment, his expression impossible to decipher. Then, a short, mirthless bark escaped him. All right, rancher. We'll take you at your word. But we'll be back. And next time, I'd advise you to recall every detail, no matter how insignificant. Important people aren't known for their patience. He turned and swung back into the saddle, his stare never leaving Dusty. With a curt nod to his men, he spun his horse around, retreating in a billowing cloud of dust. Dusty watched them until they vanished beyond the horizon, his hands still hovering. Dusty watched from the porch as the 3 riders fanned out, their granite-faced leader barking orders. The man on the piebald headed for the barn, while the other 2, like vultures scenting carrion, began to circle the perimeter of the house. Dusty leaned against the porch railing, his face a mask of nonchalance he didn't feel. He'd moved Ellie to the root cellar beneath the kitchen, a damp, earthen space usually reserved for preserving vegetables. Now it was her sanctuary. The man on the piebald dismounted and yanked open the barn door, the hinges groaning in protest. Dusty inhaled slowly, deliberately. Inside, the chickens scattered in a flurry of feathers and indignant squawks. He could almost hear Ellie's ragged breaths echoing in the silence of the cellar, feel the tremors that racked her small frame. He focused on the lead rider, who hadn't moved from the edge of the yard. The man's eyes, cold and sharp as flint, were fixed on the house, dissecting every detail. Dusty met his gaze unflinchingly. The search of the barn yielded nothing. The rider emerged, frustration etched on his face, and gestured curtly to the others. They converged near the corral, their voices a low, menacing murmur that carried on the wind. Dusty couldn't make out the words, but he didn't need to. He knew they were talking about her. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust, the brown stain a small act of defiance. When the riders approached the house, the granite-faced leader's voice cut through the air. Rivers, we appreciate your cooperation. But we'll be back. And next time you might find it unwise to be less forthcoming. Dusty didn't reply. He simply watched them ride off, their figures shrinking against the vast expanse of the plains. Only when they disappeared over the horizon did he move, his boots heavy on the porch as he went inside. He lifted the cellar door, the cool, damp air rising to meet him. "Ellie," he called softly. He found her huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with terror. She'd pulled a burlap sack around herself like a shield. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through the grates above. "They're gone," he said gently, kneeling beside her. She flinched at his touch, then slowly relaxed, her grip on the sack loosening. "They were looking for me, weren't they?" Her voice was barely a whisper. He nodded, his jaw tight. "They were." He helped her out of the cellar and back into the kitchen. She moved stiffly, her face pale. He poured her a cup of water, his movements deliberate, reassuring. As she drank, her eyes unfocused, a flicker of something behind them. I saw something," she stammered, setting down the cup. A ballroom. Grand. Filled with lights and music." She pressed her hand to her forehead as if trying to grasp a fleeting dream. "And a man. Tall, with a cruel smile." The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving her shaken and disoriented. Dusty watched her, his heart aching. The fragments of her past were beginning to surface like debris rising from a sunken ship. "It's all right," he soothed, taking her hand. "Just a memory." But it wasn't just a memory. It was a warning. A glimpse into a life she couldn't remember, a life that was now hunting her. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he had to find out who she was and what she was running from before they found her again. The peace of his ranch was shattered, replaced by suspicion and the weight of secrets yet untold. The music box's secret. Beside Ellie's bed, the music box shimmered in the sunlit room, its rosewood polished to a soft sheen. Dusty was conveniently occupied with fence repairs, a task she suspected was designed to offer her solitude as she wrestled with the night's fractured recollections, the grand ballroom, the dazzling chandeliers, the man's glacial gaze. These images flickered like phantom candlelight. She reached for the box, its cool surface a balm against her skin. More than mere ornament, it felt like a key, a conviction that resonated deep within. The melody, a haunting waltz, whispered of both refined gaiety and profound sorrow. Winding the mechanism, she watched the tiny ballerina twirl, her placid porcelain face a stark contrast to Ellie's inner turmoil. This time she scrutinized the box itself, not just the music. Intricate carvings, like living tendrils of vines and blossoms, hinted at a veiled language. Her fingertips traced the swirling patterns, seeking a hidden catch, some anomaly. She pressed a carved rose. Nothing. Another, still nothing. Irritation simmered. Her fingernail skimmed the base, searching for any imperfection. Finally, near the back, a subtle click. Her breath hitched. With trembling hands, she pressed again. Harder. A concealed panel slid open, revealing a secret recess. Inside, cradled on faded velvet, was a crest. Small enough to fit in her palm, it was wrought from gold, encrusted with sapphires and diamonds. A rampant lion, claws extended, dominated the design, positioned above a field of stylized wheat. The workmanship was peerless, exuding wealth and influence. Touching the cold metal and sparkling gems sent a surge of recognition, a searing shock through her. It wasn't just an image, it was her image. Her family's sigil. Memories erupted, a cascade of faces, locations, and sensations. A majestic estate nestled amongst the Bavarian Alps, their snow-clad peaks piercing the cerulean sky. A father, stern yet loving, his brow furrowed by the burdens of managing a sprawling estate. A playful younger brother, forever instigating mischief. And then the ballroom's unwelcome guest. His name, spoken with dread and loathing, echoed within her, Richter. Cold, calculating, dangerous, his eyes devoid of warmth. He had sought something from her family, something they had refused. The massacre. It hadn't been random brutality, but a targeted strike, all stemming from the crest. From her. Ilara, she breathed, the name foreign yet undeniably her own. Ilara von Hesse. Baroness Ilara von Hesse. The title felt alien, a mantle of responsibility she wasn't certain she desired. She pressed the crest against her chest, the icy metal a grounding anchor in the storm of returning memories. No longer just Ellie, the amnesiac survivor, she was Alara, a woman burdened by a past, a family, and a title she didn't know if she even wanted to reclaim. The music box played on, its gentle waltz now a somber lament. The ballerina spun, oblivious to the tempest within Alara. She possessed a name, a history, a formidable enemy. And Dusty, kind, protective Dusty, was unaware of the peril she had brought into his home. She must tell him. She had to shield him, even if revealing her true identity was the cost. A Baroness found. The fire crackled, spitting embers into the night. Alara watched them dance, mirroring the turmoil in her chest. The music box sat on the small table between them, its ornate crest gleaming faintly in the firelight, a silent testament to a life she barely remembered, yet one that now threatened to consume her present. Dusty sat opposite her, his face etched with concern. He'd listened patiently as she'd stammered out the fragments, the pieces of a life that seemed impossibly distant, yet undeniably hers. The massacre. Richter. The crest. The von Hesse name heavy with history and responsibility. So, Baroness Alara von Hesse, he finally said, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. He picked up a stray twig and tossed it into the flames. That's quite a mouthful, Ellie. Alara flinched at the use of the name he'd given her. Ellie. It was the name of the woman she'd thought she was, the woman who had begun to carve out a life here, on his ranch. A life she now knew was built on a foundation of lies, lies of omission, perhaps, but lies nonetheless. It's hard to believe myself, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. It feels like a dream or a nightmare. That life, the balls, the titles, the endless rules, it was never what I wanted. She recounted her arranged marriage to a man old enough to be her father, a political alliance orchestrated by her late parents. The gilded cage she'd lived in, the stifling expectations, the constant pressure to secure the von Hesse legacy. I ran, she confessed, the shame burning in her cheeks. I couldn't bear the thought of spending my life as a pawn. I wanted to choose my own destiny. Her gaze met Dusty's, and she saw not judgment, but understanding. He knew what it was like to crave freedom, to forge your own path in the face of adversity. So, you came to America, he prompted gently. Yes, she nodded. With only what I could carry. I hoped to disappear, to start anew. I never anticipated. Her voice trailed off, the unspoken horror of the Wagon massacre hanging heavy in the air. She looked down at her hands, tracing the faint lines on her palms. I was supposed to marry him, she said, her voice tight. Baron von Richter. He wanted the crest, you see. It signifies something important to my family, a right. He wanted to control it, to control everything. Dusty leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. And he killed your family for it? Alara nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. He did. And now, because of me, because I ran and brought him here, he'll come for you too. She stood up, pacing the small space between the fire and the cabin wall. I have to leave, Dusty. I have to protect you. I can't let him hurt you. Dusty rose as well, his movements deliberate, unwavering. He reached out and gently took her hands in his. His calloused skin was warm against hers, a stark contrast to the cold fear that had gripped her heart. You're not going anywhere, Alara, he said, his voice firm but tender. This is my land. And I don't run from trouble. He paused, his gaze searching hers. Besides, he added softly, a hint of vulnerability in his voice, I think I'm starting to care about Ellie and Baroness Alara von Hesse. More than I should. The confession hung in the air, thick with unspoken emotion. Alara's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge the feelings that had been blossoming within her, the quiet joy she found in his presence, the undeniable pull she felt towards him. Dusty, she whispered, her voice trembling. I care about you too. More than I ever thought possible. But even as she spoke the words, a chilling realization washed over her. Her feelings for him, her very presence here, had made him a target. She had to protect him, even if it meant sacrificing her own happiness, her own chance at a life with the man she was quickly falling in love with. Kale's return. Dust devils whirled across the baked earth, mirroring the knot of apprehension tightening in Dusty's stomach. He'd spent the morning reinforcing the barn door, his movements clumsy with worry. Inside, Alara and Maria's soft voices, a delicate counterpoint to his rising fear, drifted from the kitchen as they tackled their morning routine. He couldn't shake the premonition that the impending storm was more than just wind and rain. While patrolling the western edge of his property, inspecting the fences, he spotted them, a somber line bisecting the horizon, growing larger with each passing second. Riders. Too many for comfort. This wasn't a social call. Dusty kicked Whiskey into a gallop, the wind screaming past his ears as he raced towards home, towards Alara. Reaching the crest of the small hill overlooking the ranch, he saw them, a cluster of dark figures ringing the main house. The lead rider was instantly recognizable. He sat his horse with an almost insolent grace, radiating an arrogance palpable enough to choke the air. Clad in rich leather and gleaming steel, he was a jarring contrast to the rough-spun attire of Dusty's men who'd cautiously emerged from the bunkhouse. Cale von Richter. Dusty dismounted, rifle rising to meet his grip. He advanced slowly, eyes locked on Cale. "This is my land," he stated, his tone even, deliberate. "Speak your purpose." A cruel smile twisted Cale's lips, a mirthless expression that failed to reach the glacial depths of his blue eyes. "Rivers, isn't it? I am Cale von Richter. I've come to reclaim what is rightfully mine." He gestured towards the house. The Baroness Alara von Hesse. A chill snaked down Dusty's spine, yet his face remained a mask. "You're mistaken. There's no Baroness here." He'd shielded her with deception before, he would do so again. Cale released a dry, rasping chuckle. "Come now, Rivers, let's dispense with the charade." She fled. A childish act of defiance. "She is promised to me. An agreement binds our families." His gaze swept over the ranch, laced with disdain. "Doubtless she's filled your head with some fantastical yarn. Perhaps feigning amnesia?" Dusty's fingers tightened around his rifle. He could feel Alara's gaze on him from the porch, Maria a steadfast presence at her side. He saw the conflict raging in her expression, fear battling fierce resolve. "The woman here is named Ellie," Dusty declared, his voice firm. "She's under my protection." "Protection?" Cale's sneer dripped with contempt. "From whom? From her own kin? From her obligations? She is betrothed, man. She bears a weighty burden of responsibility. She cannot simply abscond and play domesticity with a rancher." The last word was spat like poison. He urged his horse forward, his voice dropping to a menacing murmur. "Do you even comprehend her true identity, Rivers? The import of her lineage? The immense power she embodies?" He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "She's shirking her destiny, and you, simpleton, are obstructing her path." Cale made an imperious gesture towards his men with a gloved hand. "I will not ask a second time. Surrender her to me." A rancher's choice. Dust devils danced around the horses' hooves as Cale's men stood like statues, their silence a palpable threat. Dusty's gaze locked on Alara. Gone was the Baroness, before him stood the woman he'd rescued, the one who'd aided Doc with the injured mare, the soul who'd planted wildflowers by the porch. Cale's pronouncement echoed, "Baroness Alara von Hesse. My betrothed." That single word felt like a blow. He'd nurtured a fragile hope, a fool's fancy maybe, fueled by their shared connection. Now, this haughty aristocrat, reeking of privilege, laid claim to her. Dusty scrutinized Alara, hunting for a trace of duplicity, a sign of the pampered noblewoman Cale painted. He found only fear, stark and untamed, a chilling echo of the massacre's aftermath. And beneath it, a desperate, silent appeal. His jaw tightened. This wasn't about rank or promises. It was about a woman in distress, one who clearly recoiled from the idea of leaving with this man. And Dusty Rivers couldn't abide abandoning someone in need. The saddle leather groaned softly as he shifted, breaking the tense quiet. Every word mattered here. A misstep could ignite a far more dangerous situation. "She doesn't look eager to go with you," Dusty stated, his tone even. His hand remained near his rifle, a subtle caution. A sneer twisted Cale's mouth. "The Baroness is merely distraught. She has endured a terrible ordeal." He waved a dismissive hand. "She needs the specialized care only I can give." Alara recoiled at his words. Dusty brushed off Cale's explanation. "She can speak for herself." He angled his body toward Alara. "Do you want to go with him, Ellie?" The use of that familiar name seemed to crack her composure. Tears shimmered, yet her voice, when it came, was firm and clear. "No." Cale's face darkened with fury. "Alara, don't be ridiculous." He started forward, but Dusty barred his way. "She said no," Dusty repeated, steel edging his voice. He was outmatched in terms of wealth and standing, that much was clear. But here, on his own ground, he would stand tall. "Get out of my way, rancher," Cale spat. "This concerns nobility, not some uncivilized." "This is my land," Dusty cut him off, eyes narrowed. "And on my land, a woman's word carries weight. She doesn't wish to accompany you. You will turn around and leave." The air vibrated with anticipation. Cale's grip on the reins tightened. His men fidgeted, hands hovering near their weapons. Dusty remained unyielding, his gaze unwavering. He knew he was gambling with everything, his ranch, his livelihood, perhaps even his future. But he refused to stand idly by while this woman was forced against her will. He met Cale's enraged stare. "Leave, Richter," he commanded, a low growl resonating in his chest. "And don't return." The battle for Wind Creek Ranch. The air thrummed with unspoken menace, a palpable tension that wasn't electric but far more ominous. Cale's gaze, sharp as honed steel, darted between Dusty and Alara, lingering on her with an intensity that clenched Dusty's jaw. "So be it, Rivers. You've chosen to shield the fugitive. Don't claim you weren't warned what that invites." A swift turn, his cloak billowing like a thundercloud, preceded his command, "Let's move." But near his waiting stallion, a subtle nod dismissed any ambiguity. The afternoon exploded. Dusty reacted instinctively, shoving Alara behind him as his revolver cleared leather. Gunfire ripped the quiet apart, gouging splinters from the porch posts. Blue, panicked by the sudden violence, screamed his terror and snapped his tether. The enraged animal didn't flee, instead he launched himself at the attackers, fangs bared in a savage display. A scream punctuated the air as Blue's teeth found flesh, a rifle clattering on the hard-packed earth. "Get inside!" Dusty roared at Alara, his shot forcing a man to scramble for cover. A return volley sent leads singing past Dusty's ear, stinging the air with disturbed dust. But Alara remained rooted to the spot. A chilling composure masked her prior fear. Gone was the uncertainty from her eyes, replaced by a resolve that hardened their gaze. A brief glance was enough to stop Dusty cold. She moved with a newfound grace, heading towards the barn with sinuous purpose. More reports echoed. Blue, for all his fury, couldn't hold them back indefinitely. Neither could Dusty, alone. He had to protect Alara, but she was putting distance between them. He chanced another look at the barn. The heavy doors swung wide, revealing Alara, not with a rifle but holding twin swords that seemed to catch the very light. Where had they come from? The question was swallowed by the sight of her. She moved with an instinctive expertise, a lethal ballet that stunned him. One of Cale's men, emboldened by Dusty's distraction, charged, a hunting knife flashing in his grip. Dusty tensed, ready to fire, but Alara was a whirlwind. Steel blurred, finding its mark with impossible speed. The attacker stumbled, disbelief etched on his features, and crumpled to the ground, wounded, not killed. Another, seeing his companion fall, hesitated. Alara seized the opportunity, her movements precise and devastating. A mere twist of her wrist sent his sword skittering away. He raised his hands, terror washing over his face. Dusty, shaken, refocused. He continued suppressing fire, targeting those still focused on him. He watched Alara's prowess with growing wonder. The woman he'd rescued, the one who seemed so vulnerable, was a natural-born killer. The advantage shifted. Cale, witnessing the unforeseen resistance, his face a mask of fury, snapped commands. "Take her down." Both of them. But his men were wavering, their nerve broken by Alara's skill and Blue's relentless assault. They scattered, seeking shelter among the rocks and sparse vegetation. Gunfire dwindled, leaving only the rasping breaths of the fighters and Blue's frantic cries. Dusty stood vigilant beside Alara, his weapon raised, eyes sweeping the landscape. Her chest rose and fell sharply as she lowered the swords, the metal reflecting the waning sunlight. Her knuckles were bone-white around the hilts. "Where did you learn to do that?" Dusty asked, his voice gravelly with disbelief. Alara looked down at the swords, then at Dusty, her eyes a strange blend of confusion and fierce determination. I don't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It just came back. Victory and farewell." Dusty spat on the parched earth, the taste of dust and desperation clinging to his tongue. "Get back to your horses. Now." His voice, raw from shouting, carried across the small clearing. Cale's remaining men, bruised and wary after Alara's unexpected display of swordsmanship, hesitated, glancing at their leader. Cale's face was a mask of barely controlled fury. He cradled his injured wrist, the elegant silver hilt of his fallen sword glinting on the ground a few feet away. Alara stood poised, her own makeshift weapon, a sturdy branch sharpened to a point, held with surprising confidence. Dusty felt a surge of protectiveness mixed with bewildered awe. He still couldn't reconcile the pampered Baroness with the warrior he'd witnessed moments ago. "You think you've won, Rivers?" Cale sneered, his voice laced with venom. "This isn't over. She belongs with me. You can't protect her forever." Dusty moved slightly, positioning himself between Alara and Cale. "She doesn't belong to anyone. And you're trespassing. I suggest you leave before I decide to press charges." Assault, attempted kidnapping. The list goes on. He knew it was an empty threat. The nearest law was days away and Kale clearly operated outside its reach. But he needed to buy time to push them back. He gestured towards the winding path that led away from the ranch. There's a quicker way down the mountain. Follow the creek bed. But be warned, it's treacherous. One wrong step and you'll find yourself at the bottom. He knew the creek bed intimately. He'd navigated it countless times, knew where the loose rocks lay hidden, where the current ran strongest. Kale, with his polished boots and city arrogance, would be at a distinct disadvantage. Kale saw the glint of challenge in Dusty's eyes. He knew Dusty was daring him, using his own land against him. This land means nothing, Kale spat. I will have her, Rivers. Mark my words. He signaled to his men who reluctantly gathered their horses. He retrieved his sword, wincing as he gripped the hilt. Elara watched them go, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaky and disoriented. The image of Kale's snarling face, the feel of the makeshift spear in her hand, the echo of steel on steel, it was all too much, too intense. As they disappeared down the creek bed, the silence that descended was thick and heavy. Dusty turned to Elara, his gaze searching. Are you all right? She nodded, but her eyes were wide and unfocused. I don't understand. Where did that come from? She gestured vaguely towards her hands, as if they were foreign objects. Dusty stepped closer, his hand reaching out, then hesitating. We'll figure it out. We have time. He couldn't promise her safety, not with Kale still out there, but he could promise her his protection, his loyalty. He led her back towards the ranch house, his arm gently supporting her. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It was a beautiful sight, but Dusty couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over him. Kale's threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Inside the ranch house, Elara sank onto a chair, her body trembling. Dusty busied himself with building up the fire, the crackling flames a small comfort in the growing darkness. He glanced at her, his heart aching with a mixture of pity and something more, something he couldn't quite name. We need to be ready, he said, his voice low. He'll be back. Elara looked up, her eyes filled with a newfound determination. Then we'll be ready for him. The fear was still there, but beneath it a spark of defiance had ignited. She didn't know who she was or what she was capable of, but she knew one thing, she wouldn't be a victim. She would fight. For herself and for the man who had saved her. A new beginning. The sharp morning chill had given way to the mellow golds and azure washes of late afternoon. Dusty watched Elara move within the cabin's confines, her actions imbued with a serene grace, a naturalness that hinted at a lifetime spent in such humble surroundings. The hearth crackled with cozy energy, flinging playful shadows across the rugged log walls, a world away from the gilded cages of her past. His day had been spent patrolling, the rifle a familiar, reassuring weight. Kale's threats still festered, a bitter seed sown in their fragile sanctuary. But with each glance back at the cabin, seeing Elara tending her burgeoning vegetable garden, a sense of equilibrium returned. She straightened, wiping her forehead, then faced him. Her gaze, once haunted, now held a quiet strength, a resolute spirit that stirred something within him. Dusty, she began, her voice a soft declaration. We need to talk. He leaned against the porch, his gaze fixed on her. I'm listening. Elara inhaled deeply, the scent of turned earth and verdant life clinging to her. I've been doing some thinking. About everything. A pause as she carefully considered her words. About who I was, who I am, and who I aspire to be. He waited, his pulse a steady drum against his ribs. The memories, they're coming back sharper now. I recall the formal balls, the empty titles, the endless stream of suitors vying for a prize they couldn't comprehend. Richter. His predatory stare, his suffocating control. A tremor passed through her, defying the sun's warmth. But I also remember the crushing solitude, the feeling of being a bird trapped in filigree. She closed the space between them, her eyes locking with his. Here, with you. I've uncovered something I never imagined existed. True freedom. A sense of purpose. Love? Dusty's breath hitched. I want to stay, Dusty. I want to stay here, with you, and build a life that's authentically ours, not one dictated by convention or duty. The words hovered, a delicate melody of yearning and hope. He pushed away from the railing, closing the remaining distance. Are you certain, Ellie? He asked, using the name he'd gifted her during her amnesia, the one that still resonated with truth. She nodded, her eyes glistening. More certain than I've ever been of anything. She reached up, her fingertips tracing the weathering lines on his face, etched by sun and wind. Elara von Hess means nothing to me anymore. She's a phantom, a vestige of someone I no longer recognize. I am Ellie now, and my place is here, with you. An overwhelming wave of emotion threatened to buckle his knees. He framed her face with his hands, his thumbs softly stroking her cheeks. Then Ellie, welcome home. He lowered his head, pressing a tender kiss to her lips, a kiss that whispered of unspoken promises and shared aspirations. Her taste was like sun-warmed petals and wild honey, intoxicating and pure. When they parted, breathless and flushed, the very air seemed to shimmer with renewed vitality. Ilara took his hand, leading him towards the crest of the hill overlooking the sprawling valley. They sat side by side, the prairie grasses rustling softly in the breeze. As the sun began its descent, painting the western horizon in vibrant strokes of crimson and gold, she spoke softly. I want to write a letter, she murmured, her voice barely audible. To my family. To formally relinquish my title, my inheritance, everything. Association with me would only endanger them now anyway. Dusty squeezed her hand reassuringly. Are you sure about that, Ellie? Completely. The Von Hess name, the title of Baroness, they're just dead weight. I need to be rid of them. Completely. She turned towards him, her gaze unwavering. I want to be your wife, Dusty. To raise our children here, on this land, to forge a future together, far beyond the reach of my past. He drew her close, embracing her tightly. That sounds like a perfect beginning, Ellie. As the last sliver of sun vanished, leaving the heavens scattered with glittering stars, they sat in comfortable stillness, dreaming of the life they would cultivate together. A life of simple joys, honest labor, and unwavering devotion. A fresh start blooming in the untamed heart of the West where all things felt possible.